So we left off with this super cool recycler view layout. It seemed much better than our linear list layout, right? Because we could see the star data, and although that adapter class does take a little bit of mind bending to get your head around it, at the end of the day, it's kind of cool that we can do individual layouts for each of these. So we're going to take it one step further now, which is to create a layout where these will we'll have our own custom shapes, and we're going to have a different shading if we click on it. So we're going to see how to do that. And the great thing is we actually have to change very little programmatically from what we did before. So I'm going to start by right-clicking and say New Activity, Empty Activity. Everyone's surprised, right? And I'm going to call this one the Grid Recycler View. Or sorry, Grid Recycler View Activity. Okay, so it's a new empty activity, and I'm calling it the Grid Recycler View Activity. Actually, I'm going to get rid of the word view. It's called the Grid Recycler Activity. So it's not gigantic. Let's say finish. Add to GitHub. And I'll set up my binding class right away. Okay, so now when we go to connect this all up, we've already got the binding class set up. It'll already connect with our XML, so we should be good to go. So now, for our XML files, let me just close a few things down here. So when I click on my activity grid recycler view, I get a blank canvas. And what I'm going to actually do, since it's going to be pretty much the same as our other view, is I'm going to open up my activity recycler list XML. So that's the view we just did. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to, under split, I'm going to paste it in. So initially, it's going to look the same. Where it's going to change is down here in our recycler view. So last time we used a linear layout manager, right? So it just puts things one on top of the other. So this time I'm going to say grid layout manager. So it still looks the same, but I'm going to tell it to have 2 columns. Okay, so that's the grand change. Not too hard, right? Now, the other thing that we want to change, though, in order to get these shapes to show up around our image, we need to provide those. We need to build those. Sure. Yeah, no, fine. So all that I changed between let's go back here. So I copy and pasted from our other XML file, right? So this was the one that we just used to get the linear layout. So now in my grid recycler, all that I'm doing is I'm changing the layout manager here to be a grid layout manager. And then I said span is 2. So it puts it in 2 columns. So that's all that we did so far. And then the other thing that's going to change is, see right now, if we wired it up, they would start to overlap each other, right? I want them to be more in a vertical orientation instead of horizontal orientation. So I need to create a new layout file, right? So our old item restaurant layout file did it horizontally, but my goal now is to do them vertically and to put this shape around it. So let's start with the shapes. So I'm going to go under the drawable folder here, package. I'm going to right click and go new drawable resource file. Okay, so again, I'm in the Android under resources, drawable. I right click, I say new drawable resource file. And I'm going to call this background. And the root element is a shape. And on the right hand side, you'll start to see what our shape looks like. So we just have to start giving it attributes. Because right now it's basically a big blob. So I'm going to say, let's make it a solid color. And I'm going to make the color FFF. Okay, so it's just a rectangle. And then I'm going to give it a stroke. So we're going to put a little border around it. 3dp. And the color, again, the colors I just grabbed off of, I played with a color picker to get some colors that I liked. So that's just sort of a light gray border. So that's the stroke around our shape. And then the last thing I want to do is sort of round those corners. So for that, they've got a good one called corners. And you can set the radius. And I'm going to do 10 dp. So that gives us these rounded corners here. So that's our standard background. Now, when the person clicks it, we want to have a slightly different background. We want it to stand out. So it gives them the perception that they're clicking something. So when I see if I click on this, how it turns color, that gives the user the perception that they're clicking like a button. So we need another shape for that. So I'm going to right click again on the drawables folder and say new drawable resource file. And this one, I'm going to call it background as well, but I'm going to put underscore selected. And the root element again is a shape. Okay, so I called it background selected, root element's a shape. Add it to GitHub. And what I'm going to do is take what I had for the regular background and paste it in. The only thing I'm going to change is the color of it. So I'm going to go CCC. So it fills it with this light gray. Okay, so hopefully so far you're like, yeah, that's not hard. Because it's not. This is pretty straightforward stuff. And the last thing we need to do is we need to create a shape that combines hey, what was the root element of the background shape? Same shape. So this is my background element, background selected here. So the last one we're going to do is I'm going to right click on the drawable folder again, and I'm going to do new drawable resource file. But this time, I'm going to leave it as a selector. And I'm going to call this the grid item selector. Okay, so this time the root element's a selector. And I called it grid item selector. And in here, we're going to add some items. And I'm going to say Android drawable background selected. State pressed is true. So when I click on this shape, it should give me background selected. And when I'm not clicking on it, it should just give me the regular background. We can make this. And the order of these matter. So we now have everything we need to make this grid view work. So what I'm going to do is I now, just like before, you remember we had this item restaurant file where we had this custom layout for each item or each restaurant. We need to do the same type of thing, but we need to do it for our grid layout. So under the layout, I'm going to right click and say new layout resource file. And I'm going to call it item underscore grid restaurant. And I'm going to drag in a text view. How are we doing for time? Yeah, we're okay. And I'll center it. And I'm going to drag in a rating bar. So under widgets, we have a rating bar. Drag it in. Awfully big. And we can center it as well. We'll get this looking a little more tuned in a second. And one of the things that we're going to do is right now, our width and height say match the parent. So it's as big as it can be. And what I'm going to say for the height is, let's just make it 100 dp. Okay, so it's only going to be that tall. And now we can say top to top of parent, bring our text view up. And for the rating bar, we can say top to bottom of the text view. So now at least they're in the right sort of area, but they're still not centered. The two of them aren't centered. They're pulled to the top. And if I try to just bring the rating bar one, if I said, you know, bottom to bottom of parent, it pulls the rating bar down, but not the text view. So it's not, it doesn't give me exactly what I want. So the kind of the easy way to do this is in the design view, and you can select both items. So I hold Control left click to get both items, and then I can right click, and you see how you have different alignment options here. So let's call vertical centers. No, that's not what we want. Center vertically. So I've got both of them selected. I'm going to say center vertically. And now these two items are centered vertically. And I can change the size of my rating bar to be a little bit smaller. So I can say style, rating bar small. Now it's really starting to look like our intended item. For the text view, I can change this to be tools and say, someone said Burger King earlier. The Whopper, for fast food, the Whopper is arguably one of the best burgers out there. For fast food. It's not a gourmet burger, but for fast food burgers, I like it. And we can adjust our text size. So there's our regular font size. So now it's starting to really look like something, but it doesn't have the features of our shape that we wanted. So what I'm going to do is up here at the top in our constraint layout, I'm going to say the constraint layout, I'm going to set the background to be our grid item selector. And I'm going to say that it's clickable and that it's focusable. And that's all we need to do with our layouts. So let me sync that. I'm just going to put this into one of those paste bins for you. Save you some time if you haven't got it already. And I'll put it onto GitHub. Go. All right. So I promised you earlier that once you understand how these adapters work, that they're actually not that complicated, and we have to change very little from project to project to project, or from layout to layout to layout. I am going to change my names here slightly from text view 2 to just text view, and from rating bar 2 to rating bar. Other than that, I'm going to leave the rest of this as is. Now, we're going to need to set up an adapter that allows us to get our data, our restaurants, and populate them into this layout. So to do that, I'm going to go up here. I'm going to right click, say new Kotlin class, and I'm going to call this the grid adapter. Now, here's what's great. Our other adapter, after the class, I'm going to copy all of this. So I'm just going to copy everything we had. So I'm basically copying after the name of our adapter, I'm going to include all the arguments and everything. And I'm going to take it to my new grid adapter, and I'm going to paste it in. And where we're going to need to change things is our layout file here is now going to be item grid restaurant. And I thought I had actually made those the same. It's for some reason not seeing. So I called this restaurant view holder. So that's the same. It's weird how this one method is not. Okay, well, let's see what it thinks it should be. I'll do implement down here. These are, it's because of this, yes, which is I think what Lindsay was getting at. So here, I called it recycler view adapter, which is not what this one is. It's the grid adapter. So there we go. Now I don't need that. So because in my item grid restaurant XML, I named the fields the same way. All I actually changed here was the class that I'm extending and which layout file I'm pointing to. Everything else I'm leaving the same. So I think it's going to work too. Very exciting. So I've changed my adapter now to work with my grid adapter instead of my, kind of vertical list adapter. And all I have to do now is update my activity. And hopefully you're following what I've done. So all I did, again, I pasted it in from the other adapter. I changed here on line 12 to say that it's a grid adapter, not the other type of adapter, the recycler view adapter. And I changed on line 28 which XML file I'm pointing to. And everything else I left the same. So just two things. And now let's go to our grid recycler activity. Let's close a bunch of these things down. And our recycler list activity, this is all we needed to do to get our recycler view connected with our adapter. So we're going to do the same thing here. So in here, paste it in here. So I use the same view model class. I don't need to do anything new there. So I'm going to say view model, get restaurants, observe it for changes. I get my list of restaurants. And the other thing I'm going to change here is I'm just going to change the name so it's a little easier for me to read. And the type of adapter that I'm going to create is the grid adapter. And that's it. So access my view model, get my list of restaurants. I create an instance of my adapter class, and then I did call it vertical recycler view. I should change that. It's not a good name. So in my layout for activity grid recycler, you see how I gave it the ID of vertical recycler view? I'm going to hold, so I'll let you get to that file first. I'm going to place my cursor in here and hold Shift and push F6. And now I can change this to be the grid recycler view. Hit refactor. And that will, everything that referenced it before will now be updated. So I can go back to my grid adapter class, and I can see, my activity class. Oh, I didn't update it there. All right. There we go. Can you show that again? Sure. So all that I was saying is the ID that I had, because I copied and pasted my recycler class from one file to the next, and the downside of copy and paste is my IDs were the same. So in my activity recycler grid view, so I went into resources, layout, activity grid recycler. I changed the name here from, I think it was linear recycler view, and I just called it grid. And the way that I renamed it was I put the cursor somewhere on the word, I hold down Shift, and I push F6. And that brings up the rename utility. So if I called it, I don't know, Ben's Magic widget, I'll change it back. But if I did that, you would see anything that referred to it, which actually happens to be nothing, would have updated. So anyways, I'm calling it the grid recycler view. And when I go back to my grid recycler activity file, just make sure that you update the binding to say grid recycler view. And then we say our adapter equals our grid adapter. And the only thing left is really to update our Android manifest file so that it points to this new layout. So let's do that. I'll go to the Android manifest file. Here's my grid activity, my newest activity. So I'm going to close the XML. And all that I have to do is I don't know why it wants that spaced. I just need to move this intent filter. So I'm going to cut it and paste it up here in my grid recycler activity. And then fingers crossed, heart beating. Let's hope it loads. Uh-oh. I've got an unresolved reference here. In my, what's going on there? Oh, interesting. So in my recycler list, it changed the name. Don't know why I would have done that. Oh, it's called vertical recycler view. I wasn't running into these issues before, but what's it complaining about this time? Inferred type was string. So line 45. It's funny, we didn't even modify this file, but now it's complaining. What it's saying here is that on line 45, my message here could be null. So we should use type safety on it. Let's try that again. Well, this isn't supposed to be how the class ends. It's supposed to end with it going, that's so simple. Let's do a clean. So when you do a clean, it gets rid of all these cached files. But then when you do the rebuild, it does take a lot longer. There we go. 21 seconds. Let's try playing our app here. That's crashing. Something's crashing it. Let's see what this error message says. Linear layout, measure child before layout. Okay, so my grid adapter is getting a null object reference. Okay, and it looks like we're not alone. Darn my cut and paste, copy and paste. I shouldn't have done it. I knew I shouldn't have done it, but I thought it'd be the fast way. All right. So our IDs are text view and rating bar. So when you're seeing a null reference, it's basically not seeing these IDs is the short version of what's going on. So we need to understand why that's happening. Miles says line 19. Yeah, so mine, I changed my name to be just rating bar. But let's try to give it a unique name and see if that removes the issue. I wouldn't think it would, but Is that? So I just had it called text view. There's got to be one little gotcha. There. Woo! It came up. Okay, so what did I change there? Basically, I had an issue in my adapter. Let me go to my adapter class. Okay, so in my grid adapter, I was referring to something called text view or name text view. And in my XML file, this was just called text view. So it couldn't see it, right? So that's where it was getting, it's trying to look for the text view, couldn't find it, so it triggers that null pointer exception. So by doing that, it solved, I also gave a unique name here, but I don't think I actually need to do that. I think I can just it was just that my IDs were off. So now it works. And then you'll notice these are a little tight together. So we might want to add a little padding around our items. And because these are handled with layout files, it makes it a lot easier to make that change. All I have to do is go to my item grid restaurant, and here at the top level, I can just put some padding around it. I'm just going to make it a small bit. I'm going to call it 5dp, and I'll call it grid padding. So now when I rerun it, there should be a little bit of padding around them. Maybe what I wanted was margin then. There we go. And if I click on them, you can see it changes the color, and they're sorted alphabetically. And that's where we're going to end the class. And I'm going to stick around for some questions because I know there are some. But I can stop the recording if people want to share their screens and whatnot.